Okay, welcome everyone. This is Leon Burnett. I'm coming to you from Huntsville, Alabama. In Huntsville, Alabama, on noon, and across the South, we say at 12 o'clock, this is the blues at high noon. And so there are a lot of radio shows that do that. Before we get started, I also want to thank you for inviting me. And especially on June 1st, many of you might not know this, but this is the beginning of Black Music Month, celebrated nationwide, worldwide, to honor those who've contributed to Black music culture. So I'm really privileged today to be able to talk to you a little bit about why they sang the blues. Now, I'm going to get ready to share my screen. But before I do, I only see one person, Maureen. How you doing, Maureen? I can't see Renee's iPad or Jerry, Ramona, or David. But how many of y'all have been to the South? Have you ever been to the South or to Mississippi? Just maybe put something in the chat box and say, yes, you have, no, you haven't. And maybe one day you can come down here, you can join me on either the Civil Rights Trail or the Mississippi Blues Trail. Okay, David, yes, you've been here. Maureen, you got to come one day, okay? Don't be afraid. I've had a lot of people say, no, I have not been to the South because I'm afraid. Well, it's changed, but the history is still the same. So I appreciate everybody coming. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So give me a couple seconds. But when we get done, I'm going to allow you to ask me any kind of questions that you might have. And we're going to go through that. So let me share my screen real quick. Okay, sharing. All right, we are now at Why They Sang the Blues. I am also the owner of the Civil Rights Trail Tours, and I do try to bridge heritage with culture. So we're going to go to the first slide. Now, this presentation is not going to be about how to play chords or you know, the rhythms of the blues, but it's why they sang the blues and the intersection between blues music and the civil rights movement. So let me go here and find out my little button here. All right, so this is what we're going to talk about today. What is blues music? We're going to talk a little bit about the Mississippi Delta, why they got the blues, and the flood of blues, racial terror in America, and just really what is the blues. The first I said, what is blues music? So we're going to talk, it's kind of two different things. And we're going to spotlight B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters, Robert Johnson, and the legends of the blues. Now, I'm going to play some songs for you, but I'm not going to play a lot of it because of our time. But I want you to look at some of these pictures here. Up on the upper left, you see police brutality. Police brutality was rampant in Mississippi, and racial violence was rapid in Mississippi during the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and the 70s. And as you can see, a lot of the people in the South, Mississippi, lived in little shacks. And I'm going to tell you why they lived in shacks and everything. Now, that little bitty house on the left, that's just a wooden frame house. That is the house that famous blues musician Muddy Waters grew up in. And if you ever go to Clarksdale, Mississippi, and you go to the Blues Museum, they have actually taken that house and constructed it so that you can see it. But I want to play you a little clip of Elmore James, and he talks about why they sang the blues and how often they had the blues. Every day I have the blues. about why they sang the blues, bad luck, no money, women, men, bad relationships, all those things contributed to why they had the blues. Now I want to go ahead and go to the next slide. Um, oh, hold on one second. All right. What is blues music? Blues music is the bittersweet nectar that flows from the hearts of Black men and women, telling stories of over 300 years of slavery, suffering, anguish, and hope. And as you can see at the top, there's Muddy Waters. He is one of those blues musicians that grew up in the deep South Mississippi, who was a sharecropper. And I'm gonna get a little bit more into this story, but back in those days, when people were frustrated from working in the hot sun and on the plantations as sharecroppers, they would come home and they would sit on the porch and they would sing the blues. So blues music is the stories of those, what they suffered in the Mississippi Delta. And the Mississippi Delta is really what we're going to kind of focus on today. But here's a little bit of Muddy Waters talking about the blues.
Well, now getting late over in the evening, I feel like blowing my horn. When I woke up this morning, all I had was gone. Now getting late over in the evening, man. Now I feel like blowing my horn. Well, now woke up this morning. All I had was gone. Well, books went to the ocean running into the sea. But don't find my baby, somebody gone sure bury me. Books went to the ocean, man, that ocean went to the sea. Well, now, I don't find my baby child. Somebody sure gonna bury me.
So, Muddy Waters talking about losing his baby, losing his woman, losing his things, and we're going to talk about how they lost. Okay. All right, so now we're in the Mississippi Delta. This is where we're going to focus our presentation. We're going to focus our presentation on the Mississippi Delta. The Mississippi Delta is responsible for most of the culture, American culture, that has come to the United States. When we talk about the Mississippi Delta, we're talking about cotton, we're talking about music, we're talking about food. And the Mississippi Delta is an area that stretches about 200 miles from Memphis all the way down to the bottom of Mississippi near Vicksburg. And it's surrounded by two rivers, the Yazoo River and the Mississippi River. It is the poorest place in the South. It was home to Black slaves and Black sharecroppers. In the late 1800s, this area had more Blacks living in it than it had whites, but the white planters came to the Delta because the soil was so rich from the river when it overflowed and created the sentiment that let them be it was the perfect place to grow cotton. but it was also the place where Black folks got lynched the most. It was decimated by the Great Flood and the Spanish flu. Now, think about this. If you're living in a place that has rivers on both sides and it floods, you are going to be dealing with hardships. And it was those things that really caused the people in the South, particularly the Mississippi Delta, to experience the hardships of losing land, losing family members, losing their work, having poor conditions. Now, I don't know about you, when I lose my keys to my car, I get the blues. So, you know, and I'm sure you guys have had different things happen to you when things didn't go right, you had the blues. So you've actually discovered the blues. So these are the things that they talked about. Imagine having to deal with this. Imagine the mental stress, the mental anxiety of losing the things that you really love. So this is why they got the blues. They had to deal with violence against Blacks. They had dying cotton crops, the Great Mississippi Flood, which we're going to talk about in a second, massacres and lynchings of Black people, watching that happen, the Spanish flu, the pandemic, the Great Depression, and Black codes. If you're not familiar with the Black codes were something that were instituted before Jim Crow. They were exclusive in the South. These laws were harder than Jim Crow laws, and it made it where Black people can get arrested for almost anything. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have been watching what was going on in Tulsa and the events that people are just now bringing to light of what happened with the Tulsa massacres. But that young man slipped in the elevator and was almost accused of being someone who was harassing a white woman. The same thing happened to Emmett Till. So they could get arrested and killed for almost anything. Black codes penalized Black people for changing their jobs. So say they did not want to be a sharecropper anymore. They wanted to do something else. They might get lynched. They might get hung. They were limited to access to courts. They couldn't vote, and they were denied the rights to testify against whites. So these are things that Black people in the Mississippi dealt with all the time, and especially, like I said, there were more Black people living in that area than any other area in Mississippi. But the Mississippi legislature came back and they changed laws so that they could be in control and so that they could stop the progress of Blacks in the South. So the flood of blues, the Great Mississippi River. Everybody knows about the Great Mississippi and how famous it is, through books by Mark Twain and, stories about Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, and how it really was the one thing that really opened up America, access to the Mississippi River. Well, the Great Mississippi River in 1927 was the most destructive river flood in the history of the United States. This event is the main catalyst of the birth of the blues. It brought music and culture to the forefront. People like Charlie Patton, Bessie Smith, Barbecue Bob, and many other blues musicians wrote songs about the flood. There was blues before the flood, but after the flood, blues was produced with a vengeance. And why was that? Because now they were living with even more hardships. Imagine having to now lose all your crops. Imagine all your stuff is wet. Imagine living in tents. Imagine not having any food because everything was flooded. So what could you do? You would sit on the porch and you would sing and you would talk about your experiences of what was going on in your life. And so the flood of the Great Mississippi Flood led to a lot of people deciding to leave Mississippi, but also talk about Mississippi and what they were dealing with. Now, racial terror in America was great in Mississippi and around the country. And you have a person like Billie Holiday. Even though Billie Holiday was not from the South, she sang about the lynchings. And Ida B. Wells, who's from Mississippi, she talked about the lynchings. And Billie Holiday was dogged. Matter of fact, they got a music about why they were trying to stop her. She was exposing what was going on in the South. And because of what she was exposing going on in the South, people tried to stop her. And the United States even filed lawsuit. And if you're not familiar with the song Strange Fruit, this is just a little clip of Strange Fruit. Now, in Mississippi, there were over 684 lynchings. And so Billie Holiday talks about what was going on in America, particularly in the South. That's Billie Holiday, and I'm sure you've heard that song. This song is so poignant, and it talks about what was happening in the South and what was going on, particularly in Mississippi during that time. I'm going to, I'm on a new computer here, everybody. I'm not as computer literate as I should be. Okay, so how do you get the blues? Like I said, many of you probably, during this pandemic have been depressed or couldn't go out, didn't want to wear your mask, and you got the blues, you felt some kind of way. But in the South, this is one of the things that they were really dealing with. You see your brother getting lynched, they come to your house, you see your nephew taken away, like until you ain't got no money because your crops have died, you ain't got no job because your crops have died, and you can't vote. Can you imagine in those floods when it was cold and you ain't had no heat? And a lot of them tended to drink a lot. And after you have drink yourself to sleep and passed out, you wake up with a headache and you got the blues. Your dog just died, you got a holes in your shoes, and you got to go pick some more cotton. These are things that make you have the blues. It was a hard life. And not only was it a hard life for musicians, it was a hard life for everybody who lived there. And out of that came civil rights leaders that we'll talk about. But I want to share a little bit about the blues. And I have, my family is from Arkansas and from Mississippi. And on my family tree, there is a very famous blues musician. His name is Howlin' Wolf. His name is Chester Arthur Burnett. Just to let you know, he is a third cousin. My father's name is Arthur Burnett. His father's name was Leon Burnett, and I'm named Leon Burnett. And so I have been around the blues all my life, and I know what the blues is. My family moved from Teletoba, Mississippi, on up to Chicago. So I'm 70 years old now, but I've been listening to the blues all my life. And so this is, I just want to let you know, this is one of my relatives, and he talks about why you get the blues.
A lot of people's wondering, what is the blues? I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm going to tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues. When you ain't got no money to pay your house rent, you still got the blues. A lot of people holler about, I don't like no blues, but when you ain't got no money and can't pay your house rent and can't buy you no food, you damn sure got the blues. If you ain't got no money, you got the blues, because you're thinking evil. That's right. Anytime you thinking evil, you thinking about the blues.
A little bit of Howlin' Wolf. We're going to talk a little bit more about him as we go through this presentation. Okay. All right. So we're going to focus on some people that you know, and we're going to hear them talk about why they have the blues. Okay. Now, B.B. King from Indianola, Mississippi, down by Jackson. One of the greatest, and they call him the king of the blues. He's not the father of the blues. The father of the blues is W.C. Handy, and it can also be called Charlie Patton. But he was This guy here is what made blues and took blues international. Um, he played for quarters on the streets of Indianola. He was dirt poor. And just where he grew up alone, he witnessed lynchings. He was so poor that when he got the opportunity to work, he worked almost 250 days a year. He was the hardest working in show business. But B.B. King is going to talk to you a little bit about why he sang the blues. If you ever come down to Mississippi, I can take you to his museum and you can really learn the history of B.B. King. I'm just giving you profiles of some of these artists so that you can understand why they sang the blues. But everybody's heard this song, and this is B.B. King talking about why he sang blues. I don't know about you, but I can't get enough of B.B. King. I could probably listen to him all day, but we only have a short while. But I just want to share with you a little bit more about someone, like I said, that's in my family. And I've heard so many stories from my grandfather, my uncle, and my father about, first of all, being dirt poor, being a sharecropper. Born Chester Arthur Burnett, West Point, which is not far from Teletope, He was a sharecropper. You know, when you are born in the Delta, you don't have no choice but to go out as a little kid and pick cotton. And there was a certain amount of cotton that you had to pick. He lived with his mother, but he was always getting in trouble, and his mother she threatened to beat him one day really bad. And so he decided that he was going to walk and find his dad. He walked 70 miles with no shoes to find his dad. Now, when he used to go out in the yard at night, and he would listen to the trains coming, and he wrote one of his famous songs, Smokestack Lightning, which I'm going to play a little bit. He liked to holler at the moon, and that's how he got his name. Where he was born, where he lived in Carroll County, there were 29 lynchings. And I'm going to tie this together for you in a minute of why they sang the blues and why it was so important. But this is a scene from a movie, Cadillac Records, that shows you a little bit about Howlin' Wolf. He was a big, tall, imposing figure. I'm 6'2", 250. My father was tall. My grandfather was tall like him, 6'4", about 280. Howlin' Wolf was a big man. And he was also a businessman. He, along with Muddy Waters, they were tired of what was going on in the Mississippi Delta. And they rode that train on up to Chicago during the Great Migration to find his dream. He wanted to sing about the music and the conditions and what he was living with earlier. Now, you saw him talk about what the blues is, but he was one of the greatest performers. And I like to show people this performance because it's just an indication of his charisma and his power and his appeal to men and women. And he really liked to play up to the women. And, you know, when I've been a tour manager for a lot of artists, and that's one of the things I would always tell them, you know, sing to the women and we'll have fans. And this is one of the things that he did. But I love Howlin' Wolf. If you're not familiar with Howlin' Wolf, you should be, because his story is incredible, his music's incredible, his voice is incredible, but his performance was also incredible.
He was the big bad wolf. Now the story is he got his name from a dead man who came out the cemetery and tuned his guitar. And he been howling at the moon ever since.
I could listen to him all day too, but we're not going to do that today. There's another picture of Howlin' Wolf. He actually was put on a stamp by the U.S. Postal Service. A lot of people don't realize, but Howlin' Wolf and Buddy Waters were the reason why rock and roll grew. A lot of people say, yeah, it was Little Richard, of course, in Georgia, and Elvis Presley, but it was these guys here who influenced the British musicians, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and they covered his songs. And they loved Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters. And so they were big contributors to American culture. What pictures of him? Showing what he looks like. Okay, now we're gonna go here. I need to get to the next slide here. Let me just let this run on out. These video things are quite interesting to work with sometime. All right, Muddy Waters, McKinley, Morganville, Rolling Fork, Mississippi. Grew up in that wooden shack, the one that I showed you earlier. He was a sharecropper. He witnessed lynchings. He's the father of the Chicago blues. He's also the father of the electric blues. He took his guitar there to Chicago. He wired it up and he sang the blues with this electric guitar. And Muddy Waters, so Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, they were actually the architects of modern rock and roll. When you look at people like Eric Clapton and you look at what they say about their influences, this is who they credit with helping them to become the musicians and the superstars that they are.
Oh, yeah. Everything gonna be all right this morning. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now, when I was a young boy, at the age of 5, my mother said I'm gonna be the greatest man alive. But now I'm a man. I passed 21. I won't believe me, baby. I have lots of fun. I'm a man. I spell him a child in that relevant name. No be oh child. Why that mean mannish boy? I'm a man. I'm a full-grown man.
Yeah, he was a man. He was quite a character. He was a womanizer. Yes, he was a man. But Muddy Waters, one of the greatest blues players ever to come out of the Mississippi Delta.
Man, I'm a natural born lover, man. I'm a man.
Okay, trying to advance these slides here. All right, now, many of you have probably heard of Robert Johnson. This is Robert Johnson. He is the king of the Delta blues. It was said that he made a deal with the devil. He was just a regular guitar player, and he wanted to be a great guitar player, so he left and he went to the Crossroads. He wrote songs about lynching mobs and all kinds of people, but they say he went to the Crossroads and he struck a deal with the devil to be able to be the greatest guitar player in history. He walked all over the Delta. Remember, they didn't really have cars. They hopped trains. He was one of those people, he hopped trains, he walked, he rode on the back of tractors. He did not want to be a sharecropper. He wanted to be a musician, but he also loved to drink. He never found true love, but he was a womanizer. He eventually found death through a drink that was poisoned by a jealous husband. He was in a bar and he was hitting on the man's wife, and she was kind of going for it. So the husband went out and he got some poison. He came back in and he spiked his drink. He only made one album, but that album has turned out to be a classic. There have been many a film made on him, but he talks about lynchings and having the lynching mobs on his trail. And this, his biggest song was Hellbound on My Trail that talked about lynching. That's not one of his biggest songs. That's the song that talked about lynching. This is a little bit about Robert Johnson now. He could play the guitar. And if you play the guitar and you listen to it, you'll understand he's playing some things a lot of people can't play. But he sang the blues because he just wanted to be the best blues musician. And he talked about that. He just, all he could do was play the blues. And he learned a lot of his blues music from people like W.C. Handy. He went down to Dockery Farms. He learned from Charlie Patton, who is also credited to being the godfather of the blues. And he would go play on street corners. He would play in juke joints. He would play at farms, but he just loved to play, especially when he became the great blues guitar player that he is. This is a little bit about him.
Robert Johnson is considered one of the greatest blues artists of all time.
It's the template for what became rock and roll. I believe Robert Johnson was extremely talented, extremely gifted, and way off balance. Something's spinning strangely in that man's life. Robert was a novice guitar player, not very good.
This man was a nobody.
And then he disappears. A year and a half later, he's doing things with the guitar that even his mentors can't do. How could Robert possibly have gotten that good that fast?
The myth goes, Robert went to Crossroads, got down on his knees, handed his guitar to the devil. The devil said, once you receive the guitar back, your soul is mine.
If you do make a deal with the devil, you're going to have to pay the price.
It ended up costing him, the bill coming due.
He let his arrogance go too far.
We all have to choose how much we can sacrifice in order to achieve greatness.
Robert Johnson. A little bit about Robert Johnson. Well, the Crossroads. People talk about the Crossroads. Where is the Crossroads? The Crossroads is actually in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And Clarksdale, Mississippi, if you don't know it, is the home of people like Sam Cooke, the great soul singer. He's from Clarksdale. Ike Turner from Ike and Tina Turner. But it was right smack dab in the middle of the Delta. And right now, if you go there, there's a great juke joint that you can visit called the Crossroads. And it's owned by the actor Morgan Freeman. But that's where the Highway 49 and 61 cross over. And that's where they say the Crossroads is. So why these blues musicians sang the blues? Well, let me say this. Not only were these blues musicians from the Delta, there were people like Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was a young woman who lived on a plantation that decided she was going to go register to vote, and her sharecropper boss fired her. She decided that she would go out and fight for rights in Mississippi. She was part of the New Democratic Party that went to the convention to try to be a elector for the election. But Fannie Lou Hamer, she's from the Delta. You also have Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers assassinated in Jackson, Mississippi. He was he started out as a insurance agent down in Mount Bayou. He became the regional director for NAACP. He was very instrumental in finding the body of Emmett Till and making that known. You also have people like C.C. Bryant. People don't know him, but he was a man that took no mess, and he made sure that if you came around him and his family, he had his shotguns and he would shoot you. You also have people like Stokely Carmichael. People hear about Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael was the leader and one of the founders of the Black Panther Party that was actually started in Lowndes County, Alabama, but he's from Mississippi. He was in total opposite of the way the civil rights movement was executed. He, along with Dr. King, Dr. King was on one side that said we want to take nonviolence. Stokely Carmichael said, no, we have to pick up our guns and protect ourselves. Then you have people like Ida B. Wells. She spoke out loud and she talked about lynchings after her friend got lynched in Mississippi and in Tennessee, and they drove her out of Memphis. She had a loud voice. She was a writer. She told people about what was going on. James Farmer, the first student who tried to go and enroll at the University of Mississippi. He was from the Delta. You also have one of my favorite people in the whole civil rights movement, Dr. James Bevel, who was a country preacher. Dr. James Bevel was the architect behind the civil rights movement. He worked with Dr. King. He was the one that organized the march from Selma to Montgomery. He was also the one that organized the children's march in Birmingham where the children got beat. He was also the one that was one of the main organizers for the March on Washington. These were people who were all from the Delta, along with Charlie Patton, Son House, B.B. King, Mississippi John Hunt, Howlin' Wolf, and other people on this list. So why did they sing the blues and why did they talk about what they did? First of all, blues musicians, if they had gone out and they had talked about what they were seeing, what they were feeling, and what they were experiencing in public, they would have been ridiculed like Ida B. Wells. So they decided that they would sing it. And because of the emergence of race records, they were able to let their voices help the world comprehend what it could not see or feel or understand. Because in the Deep South during that time, they tried to censor people, just like they did in Tulsa. You didn't hear about this Tulsa race massacre for almost 80 years after it. And this is what they did in Mississippi. So it was these blues musicians who sang the blues so that the world would understand that they were poor, they were beaten, they were lynched, and that their conditions needed to change. And it was eventually when the world understood what was going on that help started to come down to Mississippi and to help the people who were in poverty. So this is why they sang the blues. Like I said, they used their voices to help the world understand what was going on in the Delta. And that is why they sang the blues. Now, I have a special playlist for you. If you'd like to know more about the blues and like to get songs that really tell a story about the blues, you can email me at my email address right there, and I will send you my personal playlist. And it will introduce you to some of the other artists and some of the other people who made blues famous and who told the story of what was going on in the South. So if you have any questions, I'd like to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And if you have some questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And I hope that you enjoyed this message. Now, can a white person sing the blues? Yes, they can. Can a Black person sing country music? Yes, they can. When we talk about white person singing the blues, I have some friends down in Mississippi who grew up under those same conditions. today, and they sing the blues because the blues is talking about what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. Can you sing the blues? If you got a story to talk about and you felt some pain, yeah, you can talk about your lost car keys, you can talk about your broke phone or whatever. Yes, you can sing the blues. But the blues originated with these people coming out of the South to talk about what was going on in that era. So that's pretty much my presentation. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that you email me so that you can get some of these blues songs. If you're not a fan of the blues, I would love for you to, hey, one day pour you your favorite beverage, sit on the porch, listen to some blues, but listen to the words. And you will understand the story of those people who were impoverished, who were in poverty, and who sang about it, who let the world know what was going on in the Mississippi Delta.
It was wonderful, Leon. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask if you can put your email address in the chat.
Sure, I'll do that right now.
Getting some thank yous in the chat as well.
Okay.
And just type that in there so that people could email you. It's just for those who are not using the chat, it's leon.burnett. Could I get it as well? Because I
Yes.
wouldn't mind having that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have yours, and I'll send it to you. But I was a direct message. I need to send this to all. Let me do it to all.
Yeah, do it to all. That's right.
Everyone. Okay. There's so much I can talk about, but
I
like I
know,
said,
and
in this
and
space,
the music really depicts the emotion and what was going on for so many people. So
yeah, music is one of the most important communications mechanisms or things that has ever happened. The angels sang to Jesus,
yep,
music,
you got that right. Yeah.
and praising. And this was how the people in the South, like I said, the Black codes, you couldn't really go out and protest. You couldn't do the things that they are doing today. So they had to sing songs, and people accepted those songs. They said, okay, well, we'll listen to those songs. But that let the word get out. And blues, if you think about it, blues and jazz are American culture that has spread our culture around the world. They hung around. So what you had people who, yeah, they the record companies, they wanted to exploit it. If you look at Elvis Presley, one of his biggest songs was a song that he took from a black blues singer. Ain't nothing but a hound dog. That's a blues song singer. But let me go back to Mississippi, and we're going to talk about country music and then the correlation a little bit. If you know a little bit about Jimmy Rogers, who's from Meridian, Mississippi, the father of country music, he learned his guitar playing from black musicians who they would sit around and play on the porch. And Jimmy Rogers, a great country singer. And the difference between country music and the blues music is both poor music, but it's the type of instrumentations that they use and the type of phrasing they use, but it's all the same. They're both poor people music.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question for Leon before we close? All right, much to contemplate and put together. So thank you, Leon. This was a wonderful program, informative and entertaining.
Yeah, I wanted a little bit entertaining because, like I said, the blues is an important cultural thing. So I appreciate the culture, the music, but also understand the story and how difficult it must have been for those people to, write these songs and pour out emotions. When you are dealing with depression and all kinds of things, sometimes you got to talk about it. And that's what they did. They sang about
it. There you go. That's right. Okay, well, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and get home safely.
Go enjoy some blues. Go enjoy some blues.
Yeah, and don't forget, Leon has a playlist to share, so please contact him so he can pass that on. More
Yeah,
thank-
I'll send it to you directly in your email. So just pass it on to me. You have my email address, and I'll send it to you. And you'll get it today too. Okay.
Thanks so much, Leon. And be well, everyone. Have a great afternoon. and
Have a
we'll
great
see-
summer.
We'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Okay, be
Bye-bye.
well. Bye-bye.